I'm Dr. Neil Payne.
I'm Kirk Lyons, and we're here for part 2 of All Things Confederate. Welcome back. Well, Neil, we have something very interesting that took place in January that I want to share with the Confederate community. Senator Kay Marsh of Virginia has introduced Senate Bill number 43, which would change the Code of Virginia regarding legal holidays. And what she wants to do is make the third Monday in February Washington Lincoln Day to honor George Washington, the first president of the United States, and Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator. So Washington's birthday is a state holiday in Virginia exclusively for Washington.
Right.
But she wants to add the great emancipator. And
does she say why?
Well, as a matter of fact, she does. Well, for one thing, because he's the great emancipator, and also because she claims all of these ties to Virginia, whereas Abraham Lincoln's roots run deep within the Commonwealth. And his great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents lived in Virginia. His parents met, married, and lived for a time in the Shenandoah Valley. His great-grandparents and multiple relatives are buried in Virginia in the Lincoln Cemetery at the Lincoln Family Homestead in Rockingham County. There are Lincoln descendants living in the Shenandoah Valley today. And during the Civil War, Lincoln's family in Virginia were slave owners and Confederates, and he visited several Virginia localities, including Petersburg and Richmond, the Confederate capital, in April 1865, just a few days prior to his death.
Well, if all of these people were his ancestors, if they had any good sense, they'd be ashamed of the connection.
Absolutely. Well, I have ancestors in Virginia, and you have ancestors in Virginia, and that really is not justification for a state holiday for us. But the very idea, as my grandmother would say, of making a holiday for Abraham Lincoln in Virginia, the place where he laid waste the countryside, made war on women and children, killed thousands of Virginians, to honor this man, the first war criminal, I think that may be a good idea. Let's go ahead and have Lincoln Hitler Day. We'll just honor the two great war criminals, one of the 19th and one of the 20th century, and Joseph Stalin while we're at it. If we're going to honor someone who made war on civilians, who is the author of the war, brought the war to fruition, and urged it on with fanaticism to destroy an entire region, well, gee.
Well, can you imagine the people in Eastern Europe making Genghis Khan Day or Attila the Hun Day? Somebody who has destroyed and burned and pillaged and looted.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to make a holiday for them.
Well, and there's been a lot of internet traffic on blog sites regarding the holiday, and one of the biggest proponents, the main argument seems to be, is this is so we can have racial reconciliation and healing and end the strife and legacy of the, quote, Civil War, unquote. And my response to that is, well, okay. Is there a Lee Jackson bill on the docket in Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York?
I think that would help promote racial reconciliation
I think it would too.
And healing. Yeah.
And reconciliation is a two-edged sword and a two-way street.
That's right.
It's a two-way street. And there's nothing being done to ameliorate the persecution of the Confederate community. We are vilified, hated in the press and among our social elite and our government and many of our clueless citizens. And then they want to come and throw gasoline on a fire in Virginia by honoring Abraham Lincoln. I just don't think that dog's going to hunt.
Well, they started with that stupid statue at the Tredegar Iron Works.
Right.
And so it's just I think it's an example of how you have the South being infiltrated by people that don't belong here, Yankees and others.
And these people don't care what the majority of Virginia citizens want.
They don't.
They do not care. So you get they may pull this off, and such an insult. Doesn't Washington deserve his own day? Probably the founding father of this country, a Virginian, he deserves his own day in Virginia. I mean, we've already dethroned him in our federal holiday because we now have President's Day. And frankly, I think it's insulting to the few great men who have been presidents to honor all of these rapscallions just because they happen to claw their way to the White House for 4 years. We had a Lincoln holiday. When you and I grew up, we got it was Washington's birthday, and that to me is what it still is, February 22nd, and whether it falls on a Monday or not. It's just absolutely callous, insensitive, and hateful, though, to try and push a Lincoln holiday in Virginia. That's like celebrating having a rape victim and having the rapist's birthday celebrated right there in front of her. That's the same thing.
Yeah. What else have we got over there?
Well, we do have a very interesting thing. We have enough enemies in the Confederate community with people that are opposed to us, but it gets a little intolerable when our friends don't act like our friends. And I'm referring to, we're picking on the Friends of the Hunley today, but there's a lot of other guilty folks out there that are now shamelessly promoting and fundraising money for the Hunley among the Confederate community, but not bothering to even mention the name Confederate in their fundraising for these men. The Hunley, of course, was a Confederate commissioned privateer that sank a Union warship in December of 1864. In the fall of 1864, it sank and was found and has been recovered and restored, and it's been making news all over the country because they're finally have it off the lift and you can actually see the Hunley unsupported. And that's what, and a lot of our friends in the Confederation have been showing the news clips and about the Hunley, and CBS News had a story on the Hunley, and the Hunley people managed to get through a 4 to 5 minute news story and did not mention the word Confederate once. And I've had several people criticize me for pointing this out as, oh, I'm obviously making this up or I'm paranoid. But no, I've looked at their website. Their website in their fundraising doesn't mention the word Confederate. In their news reports, they don't mention the word Confederate. Their money begging letters do not mention the word Confederate, and we have copies of these we'll be happy to make available to you. This cannot be tolerated.
No, it can't. I don't know why that the name Confederate itself should be thought of as something, as a negative thing. The country started out as a confederation, and the articles of the Confederation are supposed to be a confederated form of government, not this unitary tyranny that we have now.
Well, I can tell you where it's coming from. It's these fundraising experts and consultants are telling these Southern-based historical organizations that using the word Confederate offends people and they won't send you money. So don't use it. Now, if you're the Cedar Creek battlefield or something closer to where northern people participated, I don't know if that'd have any problems or not. I generally tend to think that most of the Civil War interest is among people that are enthusiastically Confederate. They're the ones that fund these things. I think that only a minority of the money comes from northern coffers because, by and large, most northern people could care less about the so-called Civil War.
That's true.
That's not something that's interested them.
But, for instance, in Europe, which side do the Europeans like to reenact on?
Right. You can't find a Union reenactor. They're all Confederate.
They make them play Union for a year before they let them reenact as Confederates,
Even if that advice is true, and I don't think it is, I think it's just part of a politically correct agenda. But for people like the Friends of the Hunley to sign off on this and actually go after members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, the United Daughters of Confederacy, Civil War roundtables, and not even mention the country that sent these men into battle. These are some of the bravest men that ever went to sea, and they went to fight for the Confederate nation. They were Confederates. Yes, it was not the CSS Hunley. It was not a commissioned naval vessel.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
But it was a Confederate. It was a Confederate privateer commissioned by the Confederate government with a letter of marque. And these men considered themselves Confederates. They were Army and Navy personnel of the Confederate Armed Forces.
Confederate Navy, right?
Exactly. And it is an insult to their memory for these people to shamelessly beg for money and not even mention the nation that sent these men to war, as if they were just some great guys just sitting on a beach in Charleston and decide they'll go out and sink this United States ship. And,
entrepreneurial tinkerers.
Yes, and they just did it because they thought it was just a cool thing to do.
Brought it up and did it, yeah.
So never mind that, don't show that Confederate flag in the background there. We can't have that. Mm-hmm. So Hunley, friends of the Hunley, you need to get on it. Yeah. And we're going to continue to call attention to this until you do the right thing and start mentioning Confederate in your fundraising. It isn't hard. We will spell it for you. CONFEDERATE. You got it? Then start putting that in your broadcasting. Well, that's all the time we have, Neil.
All right.
This is saying till next week from All Things Confederate.